I'm Gamby from the Fantasy Hockey PD, and I've been assigned to the case of Jakub Voracek. And from here on out, I'm saying Jakub Voracek is placed on Bust Watch. Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It only makes sense if you have a hot hands video to, on the other side, have a cold hands video, or of people that are getting dropped a lot. And so we came up with the idea of Bust Watch. Who's on Bust Watch because they're getting dropped a lot? And contrary to the other side, it's pretty much a story of let's go through the stats and see whether you should be dropping them, or if the numbers say, you know what, it's a little bit too early, people are overreacting. And so in this case, we're starting with Jakub Voracek, who through 4 games played, yes, only 4 games, let's remember that, has no points. 15 minutes of average time on ice. It's not pretty. It's really bad. And I've got to admit, even myself, I'm a little bit worried about him. I own him in my keeper league, and I'm a little bit worried. But there are a lot of actually promising signs, a lot of things that make me think, you know what, you need to be more patient with him. And if you remember correctly, this kind of happened last year. Not entirely, but it kind of happened last year. So let's start off by going through what the lines situations is in Philadelphia. Because if you remember anything from Alain Vigneault's time in New York, it's going up. Oh, cat's tail. Look at that. Hello, cat. If you remember anything from Alain Vigneault's time in New York, it's that he throws things at a wall and sees what sticks. And I feel like that's kind of what he's doing here in Philadelphia. So let's go over to the lines and see what's going on. So if we take a look at lines, the top line is Claude Giroux, Kevin Hayes, and James Van Riemsdyk at the moment. And Jakub Voracek is on the third line with Scott Laughton and Tyler Pitlick. Not ideal. I really don't like that third line very much. Tyler Pitlick and Scott Laughton are pretty awful, and they do have a 17th overall third line rating according to Corsica, which honestly, these ratings are usually pretty bad. Like they have their goaltending ratings, for example, are awful. So they have way too much recency bias, in my opinion, so don't put too much weight in them. The reason you see James Van Riemsdyk have number 29 right wing, for example, is he's actually been pretty fantastic from an advanced stats standpoint. And so for that reason, James Van Riemsdyk is getting a lot of praise. And that might be why he's on the top line, actually, is because he's so good at the underlying statistics at the moment that he's getting a shot up there. But as we'll dig into in a little bit, you'll see that actually James Van Riemsdyk has not gotten as much top line time as you'd think. So let's take a look here at, this is a little bit of a preview to what the in-season tool will look like that we're building right now. Just a little bit of a look, but pretty much what it does is it spits out all these stats. These are all from Natural Stat Trick, so I'll use them in videos as well, but this is all kind of built on top of some of the stuff that they do. So if we took a look at Jakub Voracek, again, 4 games played, which is nothing. So I got to remember that, but his ice time is down quite a bit from last year. So down from, 18.5 minutes to 15.5 minutes. That's quite a big drop. And that can kind of explain what's here in the shots per 60. This is what I use shots per 60 as a measure of how much they're shooting. You can also use shot pace, but I prefer shots per 60. And so shots per 60 are down. And I think a large reason of that being explained is simply he's playing less minutes. And so because he's playing less minutes, he's not going to have as many opportunities to take as many shots. And that usually tends to be the case with players. If their time on ice goes down, you'll see these cumulative stats, just blocks and hits, and shots on goal go down. And so that's what we're seeing here with Jakub Voracek, is that if we see that time on ice stay down at 15.5, the shots are naturally going to go down just because he's not on the ice as much. Now, let's get to a few of the promising things, right? Of course, he has no assists, no points. That's a bad thing. But again, only 4 games. Now, some of the promising things. The on-ice shooting percentage is 2.94%. So that's right here in on-ice shooting percentage that I highlighted. 2.94%. That is so low. So low. And the reason it's 2.94% is because there was a goal scored while he was on the ice for the power play. That's the only reason. At even strength, his on-ice shooting percentage is actually 0%, whereas last year it was 10.11%. So there's a lot of room there to make up. And that's really low. The team is going to score more goals around him, and that honestly can be explained largely just from sample size. It's 4 games. There's not enough to go off of there to even score a lot of goals. So that's a big thing. Now, another good sign is that his time on ice on the power play actually hasn't gone down. His percentage is pretty much the same. Of course, 59.24 to last year's 64%, whereas this year, the minutes also haven't gone down by much. Very, very little. And so he's still playing a lot of time on the power play, same amount as last year. So his power play deployment hasn't changed. That's a really positive thing because I like Jakub Voracek's power play, and I like the players he plays with on the power play. So that's another area where there should be improvement, right? And if we take a look here at the percentage of power play shots, he's taken around 17% of his team's power play shots, which last year he took 14%. So the fact that that's still really high is they're trusting him on the power play to shoot. The goals and the points will come. So urging patience there. Now let's move over to another thing here. If we look at offensive zone start is another area where he's actually gone up, which is a good thing. So he's getting more deployment in the offensive zone, and that's a really positive thing for him. And then if you take a look at, this isn't in here, but if you look at his Corsi numbers, so his advanced stats, it's actually his best year so far from an advanced stats standpoint. So I'm not worried about Voracek just from these stats alone. Now, here's another thing that I wanted to show you very quickly before I deliver my verdict, which, if you're paying attention, you might know what the verdict is already. So let's take a look here. This is HockeyVis, and this is where he kind of takes a look at threat levels, right? We looked at this with the Holtby and Samsonov video about how much threat they were facing. So when Voracek is on the ice, which has been 47 minutes and 149 minutes without him, look at the difference in offense. They generate way more offense here on 5-on-5 with when Voracek is on the ice, plus 10%, whereas 5-on-5 without, way less offense, right? That's a pretty big gap, and that matters. So really, when you look at things like you see JVR on the top line, right? I see very likely that Voracek takes over that top line from JVR. Now, here's another thing to look at. Of course, they are worse with him on the defensive side of things, but Voracek has never quite been a very defensive player. So that actually may be something that AV could be trying, where he's trying to give him super offensive deployment, be as offensive as you can, Voracek, and let's see what happens. So that could be a pretty big thing of what they're doing, but I don't think that's the case. Because if we take a look here, so this is one of HockeyVis's features for patrons. We're a patron of HockeyVis because he does such amazing work. But one of the things that this does is it pretty much looks at, okay, you can distill the environment by who's on the ice, and then it also give you kind of teammates here on the right. So how many minutes have they played with a specific teammate versus also like how many minutes have they played together. So if you look at Giroux and Voracek, which I've almost always been a pair, forgetting the center situation, right? Giroux and Voracek have played 30 minutes together. That's a lot of time. And look at the threat levels, plus 33%. So when Giroux and Voracek are on the ice, they are very good, and they create a lot of offensive opportunities. And normally their center is Kevin Hayes. Now, one interesting thing to look at here is, now let's take a look at, how about Giroux on the ice without Voracek? Now, what's the threat levels there? And on top of that, how many minutes has that actually been, right? Because we think, oh, well, Voracek's been demoted. He's been playing so low minutes, so he's not really getting good line mates. And we'll see that, well, this broke. 1 second. Okay, so now there you go. Fixed it really quick. This is with Giroux on the ice and without Voracek. So who plays when Voracek is not there? So you'll see that it's only 13 minutes of ice time. That's nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then you see who's his line mates. So Kevin Hayes normally, and then James Van Riemsdyk. So Van Riemsdyk has played the lion's share of those minutes on the right wing when Voracek hasn't been there. But for the most part, all season, Voracek has been with Giroux, and that's really important because to me, one of the biggest worries when I was placing him on Bust Watch here, because of course he's been dropped so much. If we take a look here at Yahoo transactions for a second, Voracek has been dropped today 933 times by teams, and his percentage is down 6% over the last day, right? So yes, there are worrying signs. Minutes are down and everything, but when I look at this to me is the most promising sign so far, has been the fact that I thought he was getting very bad line mates, and for the most part, all season so far, he's actually played most of his minutes with Giroux. So that's a really good thing. And with Kevin Hayes, obviously. But that's that top line, right? And so if that's happening, I'm not as worried. I'm not as worried if he's getting most of minutes. Now, this is something to watch, because if this changes, and then now most of his minutes become Scott Laughton, then now, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit worried. For the most part, I'm not that worried if he's playing with Giroux and Kevin Hayes for the most part. So now let's load up what it looks like with just Voracek and who's been his line mates for the most part. So 30 minutes have been Kevin Hayes. 29 minutes have been Giroux. And if you go down here to where everyone else is, for the most part, all the minutes are Giroux and Hayes. So don't worry about it. Kevin Hayes Kevin Hayes and Giroux are the best line mates he can have right now. And that's what you want. And so if you look at the shift starts here, right down here at the bottom, the shift starts are offensive zone 21%, defensive zone 7%, which is really, really good for Voracek. And for the most part, he's on the ice when they're leading versus trailing, which also could have a big impact because instead of being super offensive, he's mostly sitting back. And that's also a thing with Philly is that they take a lead pretty early and then they sit back a little bit. So with all that discussed, what's the take on Voracek? Now, I'm going to say hold. I'm going to say be patient, 100%. But with the caveat and the big but of probably in like 2 weeks, once there's been like 10 games under Voracek's belt, that's when you want to dig in again to these same things and look at who the line mates are. Now, what is his shot production, and have his minutes continue to go down or stay low? Right now, it's too early to say. I do not agree with dropping Voracek right now. It's way too early for a guy like Voracek. Now, I get that it's frustrating and it's difficult, but a guy like Voracek is someone who can go off, who can produce, and has been pretty consistent across his career. I mean, if you look at last quarter, he put up points almost exactly the same every single quarter. From for quarter one, he put in 17 points. Quarter two, he put in 15. Quarter three, he put in 21. Like, for the most part, he's pretty consistent, and he gets a lot of power play time on ice, so the power play opportunities are also there. So with Voracek, my take right now is you've got to hold. You've got to be patient. Unless, of course, maybe I would say the one place where I wouldn't say that perhaps is like a 6 or 8 person league that isn't very deep. So if you're not a deep league, sure, there's probably people there that you can pick up, and Voracek may not be grabbed as much. And that's the other thing, that if you drop Voracek, the odds of someone grabbing him to be patient and hold on are very, very high. So that means that not only are you going to lose Voracek for nothing, on top of that, most likely he's going to get grabbed, and you're going to watch him do something on another team, more likely than not. I don't see this sticking for Voracek, and again, 4 games played is way too small of a sample size to be deciding something on someone like Voracek. So, look, be patient, hold, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to get future bust watches and hot hands videos, and turn on notifications to make sure you get them before everybody else. And other than that, let me know in the comments what you think of this, what you're doing with Voracek, and happy to answer any questions. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.